Hey everybody, this is Shaine Mata, and let me start by telling you a bit about an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. This is an episode in which the crew arrive at a colony in which all of the occupants are gone. They're investigating to figure out what happened, and they find drawings of this big crystal, and eventually they discover that there is a disassembled copy of Lieutenant Commander Data. So they assemble the dude, put him together, and it turns out that it is his brother, Lore, and Lore was too, I guess he reached that uncanny valley where he was too human that he made the other humans nervous. So that's why they came up with Data. And that's why Data is not very human. He's a bit of a square, I suppose, compared to Lore, obviously. And so there was this cool thing that happened in that Lore, I think it was Lore, had all of the copies of all of the journal entries for the inhabitants of the planet or of the colony. And so he could sit there and recount their stories in the voice of the person who recorded it. So I suppose, as you hear in the show with Captain Kirk and all of the other crew members, is they'll start with the captain's log or first lieutenant's log, whatever, first commander's log, blah blah blah. Which is cool that these logs are being kept and that people would record these things, and then these could be used as a tribute to those people who lived there who had perished because Lore sold them out to the crystal thing. I think that's what happened in the episode. But this is not about that. This is about the history. This is about the that ability to recreate the memories of the people who lived there. And so earlier this year I turned 50. I'm 50 years old. And you start thinking about legacy. What have I left behind? What am I leaving behind? And so obviously I'm not in my 70s, I'm not in my 80s, I'm not in any poor health. But I'm a little bit past the middle age. Matas don't typically make it into their 90s. 80 I think is a bit of a stretch. 70s, I think the Matas that I know have made it. But then again, they smoked and drank and more than that. So who knows? Maybe I will make it into my 80s. Maybe we're made of stern stuff, and I'll get there. But in any case, with that Star Trek episode, and also now I've been watching a TV show called it's based on the book. So the show is the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov, and a lot of the story is taking place because of a science called psychohistory. And in psychohistory, they take all of the data of humanity and are able to predict what's going to happen. So in a lot of ways, it is exactly the same thing that AI is. It's a lot of data. So like Google, for example, or OpenAI or any of those other ones, they're multimodal. They have all kinds of data. They have images, they have video, they have text, audio, all kinds of data that they're trained on. And then they use this data to be able to piece together knowledge to predict what a good reply is. So when you're asking it, it's not actually thinking. It's just that based on this question, it predicts that this is the answer that you want, and it's able to piece this out. So it throws out a bunch of different options, but then there's still software that kind of puts it together and makes it so that it seems very, very human, I suppose, or very natural. But in any case, psychohistory is a lot like that, in that you have data that needs to be fed into the model so that it can accurately duplicate results, or give you a good prediction. And one of the things that Harry says in the show is that psychohistory can predict trends or movements, but it can't predict what any one individual person will do. So one individual person can just do something completely unexpected that the model would just never figure out. And the same thing, I think, applies to artificial intelligence, is that it is somewhat of a statistical model. It's a very good statistical model, but it can't predict every outcome. And as we see from hallucinations, it even predicts outcomes that aren't real. So with that in mind, that's I've decided that maybe what I ought to leave as a legacy is some of these videos or recordings, so that my family has a sense of who I was or who I am now. I suppose I'll be doing more videos as I go, and there may be an evolution to the way I think about things, the way I do things, my opinions. But I think it also perhaps someday can be used to create an avatar where people can ask virtual Shaine questions, and then based on these videos, that it could produce a response that could be that is close to or exactly what I would think. It would give you an accurate representation. But the trouble is that if I don't make these videos, such a thing would never happen. Such a thing would not be possible, because then it would all be speculation. Whereas if I record it and it's on the record, right, it will be available to use to feed into the model. So that's part of the reason why, that's the kind of legacy I'm thinking about leaving. And of course, it does give my family something to watch if ever I'm gone and they need to remember, who Dad was, something like that. So, and it's not that I'm all melancholy about turning 50. I don't feel old, and I think a lot of older people do feel the same way. I don't feel beat up. Well, I may feel beat up because I'm in some regards, because I still have the effects of having had a broken leg at a motorcycle wreck, and things like that. My ankle's starting to give me trouble, and my knees are starting to give me trouble, but they're not constant problems. It's not like arthritis. It's more like some days are just sore, but then it goes away and I'm fine for the next month or two. It's just all of a sudden I'll have aches, but then they go away and I'm fine. I've never been the sickly kind of person, so I rarely get headaches, things like that. I rarely get sick, and when I do, it's a doozy. But so yeah, I don't feel old, and I don't feel like there's a need a pressing need to record these things, but I do think that if I don't start, then it'll never get done, and I'll have nothing to leave behind for my peoples to have. So I've also started to pick up blogging again. I'm starting to figure out a way to do it more efficiently, because it takes too long for me to sit there and type something up. But AI has been very helpful lately in that, for example, I could take this video, get the transcript, use the transcript to do a summary and maybe get some main points, and then use that to create an outline, and then I can sit there and dictate, like text or voice to text, dictate a blog post. And that would take me, something that would have taken me hours to do would take me maybe 30 minutes, all together. And so that's something that's pretty magical, that was not possible before. And so I had been put off from blogging because of that. It was too time consuming, and to be honest, I have pressing matters at the moment that require more attention, but I just can't give it up. I can't give up the content creation thing. It bugs me that, like, I want to create a video, but I don't. And part of it is perfectionism, and part of it is trying to think of something to post that's interesting. But then I've started to think about, because I watched other videos of people who are in their 40s and 50s who are starting their YouTube channel, and the thing is, like, who am I trying to impress, right? I mean, I'm doing this for me, and the reality is I should probably be my own audience. Something that's interesting to me and something that I would want to preserve. And maybe later on I can go back and watch, and it would be interesting if at some point I had a thought on something and then my thought evolved, and then I could have some sort of debate with myself. Well, maybe not, but the point being that I could see where I thought something at some point, and then maybe that sort of sentiment or thought or whatever changed over time. So that's where I am as far as that goes. So yeah, I guess you can expect more videos to be posted, and it's going to be like this. Not here in the dark with my lights on, but this sort of talking head video. There's this guy I watch sometimes. I don't know his name. I never pay attention to the name of the channel. He's a Viking guy, but he's always out in the woods somewhere, lighting a fire and drinking tea, talking about the ills of civilization. And I'll sit there and watch the guys sometimes, just because it's conversation, just something to pass the time and listen to somebody else cogitate a little bit about what's going on in the world. And there's another guy I used to watch also. I think he was the uneducated economist or something like that, and he was interesting to watch as well. I enjoyed watching his videos. His perspective was, or is, in that he worked in the lumber industry, and during COVID particularly, and when we've had economic problems, he could tell what's happening in the economy because of the lumber market. If there's shortages, if the price is going up, things like that. So to him, lumber is a bit of an economic indicator, and so he's able to draw conclusions about what's going on in the economy and in the world from that. And it's interesting to watch. I mean, so I think there's value in having, I suppose, I agree with those channels talking about how 40 and 50 year olds ought to start their own YouTube channel. And I think there is value in starting your own YouTube channel and putting these thoughts on the record, and maybe having other people of your age or whomever listen and watch and maybe get something out of it. I know that when I was younger, I used to listen to talk radio a lot, because if you could listen to most talk radio shows, and once you've listened to them long enough, you have an idea of what the host is going to say on any given topic. So you don't really have to listen too closely. You're just listening for the new stuff, whatever's happened, the details. But for the most part, you already know their opinions, and you already know what they're going to say, their phrases and things like that. So you don't have to pay too close attention, right? And so I could work for hours and hours listening to talk radio because I didn't have to pay attention, but it was distracting enough that I didn't have those intrusive thoughts distracting me doing something else. But now in the day of podcasts, I can't do that with podcasts, because so the thing is, like, when you open up a podcast, it's because the topic is interesting to you. And if it's interesting, you're going to be paying attention to the podcast. And if you're paying attention to the podcast, you're not doing your work. And so that's the problem that I have. And I just haven't found a substitute for talk radio. And now, because of all the electronic stuff in the house, an AM radio is very noisy in terms of radio interference. So I can't really listen to talk radio like I used to. And I suppose I could stream it, but I just haven't found a satisfactory way of streaming it like that. I don't know. My friend Jennifer suggested brain.fm, and that seems to be doing the trick. It's just kind of like it's not lo-fi music exactly, but it's similar to it, and it's distracting enough to occupy those spare brain cycles that aren't dedicated to a task, and so I'm able to stay on task a little bit longer. So, well, you know what? I'm going off on tangents, so I'm going to stop here, and we'll end this first episode of the archives for a future Shaine avatar, and yeah, we'll end it here. Good night.